The USS Nautilus was the first nuclear submarine to go into sea.
It also went under the North Pole.
It could go 22 knots above water and 23 knots underwater.
It could go underwater for 2 weeks compared to the 1 to 2 hours of a submarine of that time.
That's right, and today we will talk about how it broke barriers.
Long before the submarine, let's go back to World War II.
Submarines had diesel engines.
Diesel engines needed air to operate.
Because of this, submarines went under. They only had 1 to 2 hours before they had to recharge their batteries.
So when a boat fought a submarine, it would try to hold it under for as long as possible, which would eventually force it to recharge.
That would make it vulnerable because they didn't have nearly the amount of cannons and gunpowder that a battleship would.
That's it, barriers for submarines.
Yes, and the USS Nautilus broke right through that barrier.
Right before. So who came up with this crazy idea to put a nuclear reactor in a submarine?
Well, it's him and G. Rickover.
The General Dynamics Company built the whole USS Nautilus.
It took 3 months to build the submarine.
And they also had to build a prototype reactor in a desert to make sure it was safe.
The reactor had enough power to power a very small city.
It could generate a total of 24,000 horsepower.
The overall project cost a total of $60 million.
The construction of the Nautilus was authorized and confirmed by Congress on July 1951. It took 4 years to build the USS Nautilus and was finished on January 21st, 1954.
During its time commissioned, the submarine set new records.
Let's start with its combat abilities.
During combat drills, the submarine took out a full 7-ship fleet.
The fleet had 2 cruisers, 4 battleships, and an aircraft carrier carrying an anti-submarine team.
The reason for this was that the submarine could stay under for long periods of time.
Yeah, a long time, up to 2 weeks. Therefore, the old technique of just holding the submarine under was just useless now.
Now let's talk about how it benefited the crew of the ship.
Since the submarine had constant power, the crew would have constant AC.
In a diesel submarine, when it went under, all the power would go to the propellers.
Therefore, there was no AC or even high watt lights.
Now, this was back when everyone would smoke, so it would get really hot in the submarine.
It could go up to 95 degrees in there.
The submarine had extra power, so that meant extra perks for the crew, like an ice cream machine.
The U.S. Navy got a lot of help from this submarine.
Right after.
It posed a threat to the USS Nautilus posed a threat to many enemies,
Such as the Soviet Union.
After it went under the pole, it exposed 250 miles of Russian coast.
It gave safety to all the American people.
And it gave fear to the opposing countries.
This was such a threat because the opposing countries now know if they come in contact with America, they'll get destroyed and invaded.
Also, this was a way to spy on any secret Soviet projects they were working on.
Long after. The USS Nautilus was decommissioned in 1990.
Since the technology on nuclear-powered submarines has evolved.
Today's submarine can go underwater for 2 months.
And they can go up to 40 knots.
And the USS Nautilus was the original of all.
Conclusions.
We would like to thank you for listening to us.
We would like to thank our parents, our teacher, Miss Nichols, and last but not least, our media staff here at MHMS.
Thanks again for listening.
Good boy.
Bye.